Hello once again, dear viewers. You're watching ERi-TV. Welcome to this week's Open Mic with my guest for this evening, Susan Ngongi. She is the UN Resident Coordinator, but is completing her working tour here in the country. Welcome to our program.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Actually, this is not the first time you're sharing our floor, so...
Okay. But it's the last time. It's the last time I will be sharing
Yeah,
it,
basically.
yes.
So it's not a sad story, is it?
No, of course not.
Okay, so let's start. What is the extent of your knowledge of Eritrea and your view of the country before you got here and after?
Well, I think before I got here, it was very minimal, as to be expected. I read a few things, but very minimal. But what helped me was I was here in 2015 for a one-week mission with UNICEF. I was with the UNICEF regional office at the time, and I came to the country. So I saw the place. Still didn't know that much, but it definitely helped me when I came back as resident coordinator in 2017.
Okay, so was it the same as you've anticipated it, or was it different?
What is missing in the beginning is there are no attachments yet, right? You've read some documents. What you have at the end is you have read a lot more, you have lived a lot more, and you have a lot more attachments. So of course it is different, very different at the end than at the beginning.
Now tell me about your 4-year working tour here in the country.
It was a fantastic 4 years. I think it was time really well spent. As I said, you know, I came, I worked. I think we did some good things as a United Nations. I think I had a productive relationship with the government. I think I led the team, and collectively we had a really good relationship with the government and were able to support in some areas. Of course, there were challenges. Goats, it's now my new favorite word. But regardless, in terms of those 4 years, it was time really well spent. I learned so much in this country. And as I said, the attachments, you develop attachments with people over 4 years. And yes, that has been very special.
So what major achievements have the UN done in cooperation with the government of Eritrea within these 4 years of your working stay?
Within the 4 years, well, we had a partnership and cooperation framework, which is set in the end of this year, and we've started developing a new one. I think the key areas in which we have worked in the government with the government over the past 4 years have been in the areas of health, in the areas of agriculture and natural resource management. And those areas, I think, have progressed. There's been some work done also with the Ministry of Social Welfare in terms of supporting children with their education and their health and so on. And I think that has gone well. But we're in the process now of developing a new partnership and cooperation framework. I started the process. I will not complete the process, so my successor will be completing that process. But it seems to be going well. And again, generally, the government's view is the United Nations is most useful in supporting the work in basic social services. So we're talking about health, education, water, water and sanitation, some agriculture, natural resource management work as well, and capacity building. Those are the areas that the government has indicated to us that they think the United Nations can be most useful.
Okay, so speaking of in that regard, would you call it a successful venture, working with the government in those areas that you've just mentioned?
No, it's a successful venture. I think in terms of the relationship with the United Nations team on ground, I think there has been a good relationship over the years. With my predecessor, Christine Umotoni, it was a very good relationship, and that grew, I think, with my being here, and I hope it continues to grow. In terms of the programs and projects that we've undertaken with the government, there has been progress. But of course, there's no secret that there are some, you know, it's not always easy. The ways that we work and the government's own expectation of how work should be done, there are challenges with the system, so to speak. But as far as I understand, as far as the work of the country team is concerned here on ground, yes, it has progressed and the relationship has been growing. And also in the past 4 years, at the political level, we've managed to have quite a few high-level visits or high-level discussions in country, UN officials and the government. And that's always a sign of progress, that these dialogues are happening. So I see it as progress. But of course, there are tensions between the government and the system, which need to be, sort of progressively ironed out. And part of those tensions actually are quite natural tensions. The government is very clear that the United Nations system should support them in the areas where they think they require the support, that the United Nations system should be flexible in the support provided. And of course, the United Nations system is a bureaucracy, so flexibility is not our middle name, even though we have tried to be very flexible in the last 4 years, but flexibility generally is not our middle name. So there's some adjustments that have needed to be made in those areas. Yes.
Okay, Susan, would you regard yourself as having exchanged your experiences with nationals, and perhaps you yourself even learned a thing or two about
Of
Eritrea?
course. I mean, that's one of the richness of 4 years. I think I had relationships with members of society, sort of at all levels. There was work, of course, and I dealt with the officials that are my interlocutors in the work that I do. But I had friends across society. And so I have heard many, many stories. I have shared people's experiences. I understand a little bit more with greater depth and complexity some of the challenges. And yes, definitely. And I think you were asking also if that has changed my views.
Exactly.
It's made my views richer, I would say. Because there's one thing to have read something, there's quite another thing to have lived an experience. And over 4 years, one lives. I have a lived experience of Eritrea and dealing with the people that cross paths with me, or that I cross paths with in Eritrea. And of course, that creates a much deeper and richer understanding. So yes, definitely.
All right, Susan, we are now at the global pandemic,
Yes.
coronavirus. How do you feel the government of Eritrea handled the situation through the perspective of the UN?
I think in the early days, the government was very quick to react, I think, in the early days. By beginning of the year, we're all trying to understand what this was about. From the beginning of the year, the Ministry of Health was already working in terms of preparedness, how to make sure that the population would be protected. By when was it? April 2nd, we're already in lockdown. So those were very decisive steps in the early days that were required to make sure that we stopped the spread. This transmission. So when lockdown, the airspace was closed, we were all told to be in our houses and minimize the opportunities for this virus to move around. I think the government acted very responsibly and very quick to respond. And more recently, because of course you cannot be in lockdown forever, we have to learn to live with this virus. It's here with us now. And the situation now is very different from back then. We understand a little bit more about how this functions. Think about now and think about the knowledge you had in March 2020. It's a huge difference. We now better understand how it functions. And so things have opened up again. The bigger challenge in the beginning of the crisis was the health aspects of it, how to make sure that people stayed alive. But of course, as time moves on, it's the socioeconomic impacts, how to make sure that we can minimize the impact of this virus in our lives. Sort of economically, we know that many people were out of work for a whole year. That has a massive impact in society. And of course, it wasn't just here, it was global. So it has a massive impact in society. And unfortunately, like elsewhere, now that things are open again, there is a creeping up of the cases, which is normal. The virus moves with people. So again, how can we better live with this virus?
The new normal.
Well, it's not disappearing tomorrow. And the history of pandemics, of course, none of us have a lived experience of a pandemic, which is what makes it really difficult also to adopt some of the public health measures that we need to adopt, like masks and sanitizing ourselves and distance, etc. But from my understanding of the last time we had a pandemic, which was the flu, it took about 3 to 5 years before life sort of went back to, some normalcy. So I think we should also expect it's going to take some time.
Exactly.
So the question is, how are we going to be able to live with the virus?
Obviously.
Now,
That is what we need to be doing. Perhaps if there is any additional advice that you would want to give the health ministry in regards to the handling of the pandemic.
I think the health ministry knows exactly what it is doing. I think the authorities know exactly what they are doing. Right now, the only thing, and I know it's been discussed, but the only thing that I think needs to be considered in future, because elsewhere it seems to show to minimize the severity of the disease, is vaccinations. That's the only tool that has not yet been applied in Eritrea, but I know that the authorities are considering all the options that need to be considered to make sure that the population is safe.
Okay. Susan, I want to focus now on the collaboration between the government of Eritrea and the UN under your leadership. I want to know concrete achievements that has been recorded therein, and anyone in particular that you would say is the highlight of the collaboration of the UN with?
It's hard to choose a highlight. I think it's really hard to choose a highlight. For me, the collaboration that we have done in the areas of health, in the areas of natural resource management, in the areas of education, even through UNICEF's work with the Ministry of Education, I think all of them have been good contributions in terms of Eritrea's development plans, and I'm extremely happy with them.
Okay. That's to put it in a nutshell, right?
To put it in a nutshell, exactly.
All right, Susan, what would you say is the one thing that you wish you had more time in Eritrea to accomplish that you didn't have time for or opportunity?
I think on the work front is this partnership and cooperation framework, to have started it and to leave it halfway. Although perhaps that's a blessing in disguise, because then the person who is coming will have an opportunity also to be part of that process. So they will be implementing a plan that they have played a key role in shaping. So perhaps that is a blessing in disguise. For me, I think the one thing, I feel like the pandemic this last year just disappeared, I feel cheated out of 1 year. There was 1 year that I was supposed to travel more in the country, see more places, interact with more people, and somehow that year disappeared. I think that's the only regret. It felt like the lid was put on my stay for 1 full year, and then it was lifted up again just recently.
I'm sorry for that.
Yeah, it's all
any
of us.
words of advice to the incoming RC? Given that you are now considered an expert of life here in Eritrea?
Words of advice, that's big. I think 2 things maybe. The first one is to come and interact and meet a broad section of people. It's always helpful when one has a full life in the society. To build those relationships. I think that's really key. And in the interactions, maybe I should mention sort of one of the key ways that I view Eritrea is, I mentioned earlier that, of course there are some tensions with the UN system, the multilateral system more generally, but I feel perhaps Eritrea is a bit like, there's an expression, canary in the mine. And my understanding of what that means is up till the 80s, some miners used to take these little birds into mines with them. And these little birds have really high metabolism, really fast rates, and really small bodies. And they reacted really quickly to carbon monoxide. And so in their reaction, the miners then could better sort of, protect themselves because it's an indication that there's something wrong in there. And I feel a little bit sort of living here, discussing with people here, that Eritrea is this canary. I think it indicates that we do have challenges in our multilateral system. It's still functioning, but it has significant challenges and perhaps not functioning as per the dream when it was created. And I feel Eritrea is indicating that there are challenges in this system. And I hope that somehow we will find the collective political will to address these challenges so that we can all birth a successor system in the least painful way possible. Yeah, I feel that a little bit about Eritrea. And perhaps for my successor, I mean, everybody is different. I'm very different from Christine. I'm sure I'm very different from Amakombe when she comes. We all find our ways, but at the end of the day, what we want to be is value add in terms of supporting the government vis-a-vis their development plans and ambitions. And I'm sure she'll find her way. She's a very competent professional, and I'm sure she will be that. Value added.
Susan, now to the people of Eritrea, any final messages?
To the people of Eritrea, I think my number one message, and this was consistent from, I think, the first time we ever had an interview, was I hope that the people of Eritrea would tell their stories more proactively. The lived experience that I've had for 4 years here is very different from the perception outside. There are many people who don't fully understand how I could have enjoyed my time so much in Eritrea. That lived experience it's very different. I found that there are a lot of really good stories here, but nobody knows about them, really. I know that there are more novels that have started popping up recently. I know one of the names is Alemseget Tesfaye. I met him recently. But I know many others have started writing, but we need more, much more of Eritrea telling its own stories. There are many narratives out there of what this place is. And perhaps the effort shouldn't be really in combating those narratives. The effort should be in creating the narratives from Eritreans, developing those narratives, other narratives, competing narratives that need to be out there. I think for me that's the number one. It is a jewel of a place, and every time I say this, I always like to say, no, of course it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Show me the place that is, but it is a jewel of a place. You still have a lot of discipline in society, which is massive capital that can be used to really further those development ambitions. You don't have a comparable level of discipline in many places. You have a very cultured people, very dignified people. A lot of Eritreans that I have met have a very strong sense of self and being Eritrean, which is massive assets. You still have, and in terms of that discipline, for instance, every morning when you drive, I drive to the office, you see the ladies cleaning the side of the road. And this is all publicly supported. You don't have that in many places. So all these good things that I see, I hope that stay. And I hope that the people collectively, continuously improve the society to match those dreams that everybody has of Eritrea.
Susan, thank you so much for your time, and we wish you all the best in your working tour in Uganda, is it?
Yes, in Uganda. No, thank you very much. I will be a Bellis. I'll come and visit, I'm sure.
Please do.
At some time in the future.
Please do. Dear viewers, that wraps up this week's Open Mic. It is good night from us.